So we sorry, I was muted, sorry. So we are going to be talking about setting up a research agenda. And really, this is very key. So as I said, also as I put on this slide, research writing is actually a process. So it's a process that involves your imagination, goal setting, your actual writing experience, feedback, and you improving on the versions of your manuscript. Obviously, feedback should be coming from your co-writers or the co-authors of the research project that you have undertaken. And so, even at the start of your research planning initiative, where you're discussing your research idea and research question, you should already be thinking about your research manuscript. So this has to really be thought about early on into your research, your research endeavor or your research project. So the key thing here is that it's a process that involves a lot. And so secondly, is that there are three basic aspects for a research writing. So obviously you have the thought process, as I mentioned. So research writing involves a particular structure and involves a particular style. So you need some appropriate words and good codified grammar for a scientific audience, as we mentioned in the first presentation. So I've put here that before you write anything, you must first of all set a brief or set an agenda of what you want to write about. Okay, that's very key. You must set an agenda. You must have an agenda. And so this particular presentation will I just really want to help you on how you can set an agenda for your research writing manuscript project. So to set an agenda, there are 5 key things that you must have in mind. You must think about what is the message that I want to pass out? What is the market? What is the length of what I want to write? What are my personal deadlines? And who are those that are going to be involved as co-authors for this particular paper? So this is a key slide for you to bear and to have. So, and as I said in the slide, or as I mentioned, that setting your agenda or setting your brief can only be done only when you have your data. I would go as far as saying that it should be done only when you have your data and you have analyzed your data. So at this particular point, when you have analyzed your data and you see what your data is showing, then your data now drives your writing agenda. And that's why I've said that at this particular point, writing now becomes the master, but the data which you have is now your slave. So you are using your data to drive your research writing process. So setting an agenda is key to a research writing project. Why is it important? There are many things we do in life and we plan to do them. And so, of course, if you want to write a research paper, there should be a plan on writing that research paper. So that's why it's important. And so remember, I said there are 5 key things, and we are going to look briefly into these 5 key things that are going to help you set a a brief or a research writing agenda. And we are going to start with the message. You know, I've started by saying, start by defining the message of your paper or the article from the start. So remember, you already have done your data analysis. You have your data. And so your data should be pointing to a particular message. And so when you are writing, in fact, once I pick a particular research paper and read through, I should be able to come out with the message. And the message is, what are the authors trying to say at the end of your reader going through that particular paper? What are they trying to put out there is the message. You know, we don't just write for writing's sake. And, you know, before all of us, me inclusive, we will fall into the trap because we have written a thesis. I would just carry everything from my thesis to want to put into a research paper. You know, this association, this distribution, no. Probably all those distribution and association do not even contribute to the main research finding or the main research output from your research project. And so that's why it is important for you to define your message up front. And as I said, you should be able to write your message down in a short and simple sentence that should carry about 10 to 14 words. We're going to see some examples. For example, a student has been working and the question is trying to find out whether orange seeds are an effective treatment for GI disorder, for example, in children. Several messages can be from this research based on the analysis and the data. So one of the messages can be, orange seeds are an effective treatment for digestive intolerance. And this message is different from the second message, which says orange seeds are an effective treatment for digestive intolerance in children if given within 48 hours of onset. Those two messages are different. Probably the way the methodology to come out with these messages will be different. So your data, your result, you know, is driving how you set out your message, because that's what your data or your output analysis is showing. Say orange seeds may be an effective treatment. That can be the message at the end of the paper or at the end of the research project. And so the way you write this third one would be completely different from those other two messages. Another message could be, orange seeds do not have any advantage over normal treatment. Yeah, you're already seeing something is coming out over another treatment. So you're comparing it with another treatment. That is a completely different research methodology. The analysis will be different. And so what am I trying to say is that from a particular research project and the way your data looks, you can have a different message. And you should have a message and you should write your research paper around a particular message. That is very key and important. I mean, I cannot overemphasize the fact that your message is important in your research writing project. So, as I mentioned, you start your brief by setting out your message. My message is what I want people to retain at the end of reading my research paper. What I want the readers, the audience, the scientific world to retain after they have read my research paper. That is my message. So keep that in mind. So your message is very key, is very important, and your message should be simple. That is why I said should be written, you know, between maybe 10 to 14 words, 20 words maximum. And depending on your research projects, depending on the data you have, the research message, the paper message may be different. So the message is not the title of your research paper, okay? So as I said, the message helps, it gives you direction on how you're going to write, but it's not the title. We are going to talk at some point how to write a good title for your research paper. So beware, do not confuse the message of your paper from the title of your paper. So, but the two can be interlinked. There's a strong link at times between the message and the title of the paper. Certain journals, especially big journals nowadays, have titles that are message-driven. Others stick to the traditional way of writing research titles, where you want to see the study population, maybe the methodology in the title of what was done, where the study was conducted. You know, that is the traditional way of formulating a manuscript title. But the more and more big journals have what we call a message-driven title. And so after you decide on your message, the next thing you must decide in your agenda is your market. And this comes back to the question that Josh asked. Your market is the journal. In which journal do I intend to publish my paper? You don't just write and then at the end you're, oh, can we send this paper to, you know, to this journal? Can we send it to this journal? No. You set out your agenda, you decide after you've seen your data, you've decided on your message, you start, where do I want to publish my paper? That will now push you to go into the journal instruction to the authors on the journal website, and because you read carefully those journal instructions, you make sure that, of course, the message of your paper will match that particular journal market. For example, you cannot do a research on HIV, for example, and you want to publish that research in, I don't know, let's say Diabetes Care, which is a very clinically focused journal on diabetes. Probably, if your research was maybe something that has to do between HIV and diabetes, that would go, you know, that would pass. But if you've done your research on maybe viral suppression of antiretroviral drugs in people living with HIV, you would not want to publish that in a diabetes journal. So you see that the message of your paper will also help you in deciding the market for your paper or the journal for your paper. And so when you decide on the market, that is the journal, it also helps you with the writing style. Particular journals have, you know, writing styles that might differ. And that is why it is important, even as Dr. Aguns mentioned during our discussion, for you to go into the journal website and look at how other people have published. You look at recent publications in the journal and see the writing style, see what was written, and you try and adapt that even as you write along your paper. So you must carefully scrutinize, as I said previously, published work from that particular market or that particular journal. So that is key. So first thing, your message. The second thing is your market. The third thing you want to have down, okay, I've just mentioned, how do I choose a journal? Obviously, you know, your supervisors may help you in choosing a journal. For example, they might say, okay, no, because of this work, we want to publish, for example, I don't know, in the Lancet, I don't know, JAMA or whatever. And also, but the choice of your journal, it also is also dependent on the strength, the face value, the trustworthiness of your message, which in turn depends on the strength, the worthiness of your data. So, I mean, you would not carry a prevalent study, for example, and you want to go and publish in the Lancet or New England Journal of Medicine. I mean, they would not even look at it. So the strength of your message would also drive, you know, the way you choose your journal, because we know, as I mentioned, journals nowadays are graded in so many ways. So the robustness of your methods, the evidence, maybe the thread of the conversation, for example, during COVID, even in big journals, for example, very poor studies were published because at the time of COVID, anybody who did any research on COVID, since there was a thread of conversation in particular journals, journals wanted people to publish on the COVID topic. And so the thread of conversation in the scientific world can drive, particular selection for journals. And format of journals can be slightly different. Probably there might be some links. Journal editors might want a particular work being published in your journal if they know scientists or researchers are doing a particular research. So, and then of course, the big issue around impact factor of journals. As I said, journals are graded based on the number of publications, the number of citations within a given period of time. So that is usually called the impact factor. And so the strength of your message, the trustworthiness of your, the robustness of your method might, play a role in which category of impact factor you publish. So it is important to keep that in mind. I have there on my link, the 𝐒𝐚𝐫𝐦𝐚𝐭𝐭𝐚𝐧, a website which can also help you with regards to topics on how to select particular journals. So after you decide on your market, as I said, your journal, the next thing you want to, obviously, the journal will guide you with regards to the length of my article. How long should my article be? So it depends on the target journal, as I said. That's why it's important for you to read the instruction to authors carefully. And, if you're writing an original research article, a full article, as we talked about in the first presentation, it will usually go anything between 4,000 to 5,000 words. If you're doing a systematic review with meta-analysis, we'll go for the same 4,000 to 5,000 words. But if you want to write a short report, they would usually go around 1,500 to 2,000 words. If you're writing an essay, it would usually go anything between 700 to 1,000 words. So it really depends on what you are trying to write, and it depends on the, so the length is dependent on those different variables. The deadlines, how do I set my deadlines? It's important to set several deadlines. I've written that writing and submitting a paper for publication is a huge task. And so you should break down the different tasks and set individual timelines for the different tasks. And I've given you an example, for example. Okay, on the 1st of January, probably I've discussed with my supervisors, I've discussed with my directors of research, I've discussed with my team members, my collaborators. I am the one writing, so I set my research writing agenda, maybe for the 1st of January. And I write and I say, okay, by the 15th of January, I should be done with the first draft and then send to the co-authors. I'm expecting feedback from the co-authors by the 15th of March, and I'm expecting to send off this manuscript to the journal that we have decided on the 1st of April. So you should have deadlines, and I'm going to give you templates on how, templates which are just going to guide you on setting a research writing agenda or setting a brief. I'm going to put this template on the chat very soon, or when we are going to start having our discussions, just really to guide and to show you. The next, your co-authors are important. Writing is a personal activity, it's true. You can't write in committees. It's difficult. Although nowadays with technology, we know there are several softwares that we can use to write in committees, but writing is personal. Someone has to do the solitary task of writing, of thinking, of rewriting, or arbitrating between opposing views. What am I trying to say? It's difficult to come as a committee to write a paper. But if there is someone carrying the writing exercise and then the other co-authors are feeding into, it makes the writing faster and gives a particular speed and direction to the writing project. And so usually, the first author, for example, or or the main person, could be the senior author, could be the one directing this particular activity. And so you write and then you solicit contributions from other authors. Beware of ghost authorship or gift authorship. So we'll come to that in a minute. And I mean, a paper should not have a long list of authors. For example, I've taken the case of, you've written a case report and then we see 10 authors. You put your friends, you put your department head, you put, I don't know, nurses. No. Case report is, I mean, the person who saw the case and key people, 1, 2, 3, 4 authors is acceptable. But if it's a huge research project, then we would normally expect to see everybody that has participated in that research endeavor be included as an author. And there is an international criteria for someone to be included as an author in a paper. Another thing that you would learn to do and decide upfront is who is the first author, who is the last author. Those are things that should be discussed, because several students would complain that, oh, I've done my research thesis and at the end, I was put in as a fourth author, third author. These are things that should be discussed beforehand. And that is why it's important to set up a research writing agenda upfront. And we are going to get into those discussions probably at the end. For example, as I said, this is an example of a research writing agenda. I've analyzed my data. I've come out with my message. Seroprevalence of islet antibodies is lower in sub-Saharan Africa compared to North Africa. I've decided on my market journal, Diabetes Research and Clinical Practice. It would usually go for 4,000 to 5,000 words. I want to submit by the 30th of June. For example, these are my co-authors. These were put arbitrarily, although this is actually a research idea that I have, or that we have already written. I've written the brief and written, how will I say, the draft with Dr. Aguns, who is online. So this should be set up front and then shared with the rest of the members of the team, so the different co-authors. And so one key point to consider is that one message, one paper, one paper, one message. So your message, your paper should have one message and not multiple messages. So before you write, you must set the brief, you must set an agenda, and it's very important to do so. And look forward to questions and discussions. Thank you very much. Yes, any question with regards to your agenda? I was expecting some questions, or should I pick up on people? Yes, Gilbert.
Yes, Doctor. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much. Actually, it's just to see that the message was very clear, very sweet. So I don't have a particular question, but I am enjoying actually. So.
Okay, that's good. Yes, Harrison.
Okay, Doc, thank you once more for the opportunity. Sorry, I did not introduce myself before. My name is 𝐒𝐚𝐿 Harrison. I work with the Center for Research and Integrated Health System Strengthening in the East region. I am a holder of a master's in international public health, and I have so much interest in data-driven research. Doc, I just want to come back to, what you said during your presentation, about authors, who comes first, who comes second or last. Initially, I used to think that maybe that ranking is based on the alphabetical order of names, but it seems my thinking was not correct. And now, in this case where this is defined in the agenda, the ranking, is it dependent on the quality of work that the authors do, or how is it defined? Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, Harrison. Good question. So authorship is not defined by alphabetical order. Authorship is dependent on the participation of people in the research project. So people who have participated in the conception of the research idea and research design. So, as I said, conception, implementation of the research project, that is data collection, data analysis, and the writing of the research paper, the internal reviewing of the research paper, and approval of the research paper. So those are the key things that should be considered when, with regards to authorship. Now, who goes in as the first author would usually depend on the person who has carried that research writing agenda, probably the person who has that research idea, because those are the positions that are usually favored. So the first author and the last author. The last author is usually reserved for the most senior member of the team, or the person who carries in total that research project. So in between, the rest, that is from second, third, fourth, right up to the second to the last, those are positions that are negotiated or directed by people in the team based on their levels of participation in the research project. Probably the second author should be the person who has participated the most in second, that's second to the first author. And then the third goes, that way right up to the second to the last. And then the last would be the most senior author. It's usually called the senior authorship position. It could be the person who has that research agenda, the person who runs that research lab, So that's how this is negotiated. And it is important that this is negotiated upfront. Now, the problem can rise up where a student does a research, does maybe a thesis or memoir, but usually the idea for the research that most students do come from the teachers, come from the supervisors. So they have ownership, so to speak, of that research idea. So usually they are the senior author, and at times might pass as first author based on, things with regarding if it's an academic milieu. So, but I mean, we are going to hear some life stories from Agonsa, and I would want him to pick on that during his discussions, how he negotiated some of those, and I could come in as well. But, I mean, those are just some laid down principles on how to guide you, Harrison, with regards to authorship. So it's not alphabetic order. So it has to respect the ethics guiding those who were involved in the conception of the research idea and design, those who were involved in data collection, data analysis, writing of the research in proper, and reviewing of the research writing manuscript. So those are key things that should guide anyone to be involved as an author. Alvin talked about gift and ghost authorship. So gift authorship, basically, you bring in someone, you teleport someone into authorship of a paper, probably because that person needs maybe that particular scientific publication. Remember, we talked about building scientific credibility and professional credibility. And then ghost authorship, someone who was not involved anywhere in the research project. I mean, it's brought in, as an author for the research paper. How can we stop this practice? It's difficult for editors of a journal to know this upfront. But usually where this is stopped is when you have already submitted a paper, and then during the review process, the authors will write, oh, sorry, we have to include this author as, as a co-author. As a co-author. Usually editors will say no, because there's a risk that that person who wants to now be included after the paper has already been submitted might be a ghost author. I don't know if Dr. Aguns have anything to add with regards to those first.
Yes, Dr. Kati. So on the subject of ghost author and gift authorship, I mean, as medical doctors, as scientists, the quality we have to embed in ourselves is honesty and credibility. Authors trust, because we are putting out research there that can serve as a basis for guidelines in clinical practice. So journals expect us at least to be trustworthy, to put out good research, and to be honest. There are no, to the best of my knowledge, there are no set criteria to determine who's a ghost author or who was added there without having published. Although what some journals do to combat that is to send emails to all the authors involved. They know that, hey, this paper was published with your name in it, and you have the right, to write us and tell us I was not part of it, or it's a sham. Recently, there's a new journal here in the United States called Curious, and what they have done is publish a wall of shame in which, post-publication, if there are evidence that come to light that says that this author did not participate in this paper, then that paper is retracted and then published on the wall of shame. So hopefully this serves as a deterrent to people who, are authors in papers without having worked for it.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. And the other thing which, I don't know if you remember, we had a particular case recently where we added an author in one of our papers during the review process. Can you just throw some light on that and how that was permitted?
Exactly. So Dr. Kata and I were writing within a meta-analysis protocol, and we had submitted to BMJ. So we submitted the first draft, and then during the peer review process, we included another author who is a public health expert. And so, for the sake of transparency and for the sake of credibility, we wrote to the journal and told them, hey guys, we're putting a new author. And this author was not present at the beginning, but however, these are the steps, or this is the capacity in which he's going to serve as an author. And as such, we'd like to include him as a co-author moving forward. And it was accepted, they appreciated the honesty and eventually we added him as a co-author, and that was published. So for you to be an author, like someone asked that question, certain criteria to fulfill. First, that you must have contributed significantly to the paper, either by contributing to the thought process or to the writing or to the analysis. You must have given your approval to be included as an author, and you must have given you must have proofread the final version and said, yes, it can be published. So, I mean, you need to be open with journals and tell them, these are the co-authors, these are their contributions, they agree to this paper, and as such, they're eligible to be co-authors.
Yeah, really great response. And like in the case of the systematic review, we wrote that because when we received the reviews, we were like, this new author has been the one who has contributed enormously in us answering or giving a rebuttal to the reviewer's comments. And so it would be just normal for him to be included. And so that's, as Aguns mentioned, that was accepted by the editors. So that it's a rare case, but coming up front to say that this is what has been done during the review process, this person has been instrumental, it's key, but not just write to the, oh, we want, and maybe once you're submitting your revised copy, and then the editors notice that, hey, the authorship has moved from maybe 8 authors to 9 authors, for example, then obviously they would just consider that as a very strong violation of ethical principles, and they would probably just reject. And so those are key things to consider. Any other question? Yes, Loic.
Okay, Doc, thank you for the presentation. My name is Deski Loic, final year MSc student in epidemiology and control of infectious diseases, University of Buea. Actually, my worry is at the level of the message. You said the title must not necessarily be the message or does not necessarily reflect the message. So I want to ask, is it not problematic for you to pick up a paper or a research paper and the title does not reflect the message? So Doc, please, can you help throw more light on that?
Sorry, Lloyd, can you just ask again? I was trying to admit some people into the Zoom. Sorry.
Okay. I have a worry at the level of the message.
Yes. Lloyd, you're muted.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, you were muted. We were not getting you. You were muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I was saying my worry is at the level of the message. So I want to find out, you said the message is not the title, but the two can have a link. So I want to know if it is problematic for your title not to be linked to your message, and how do you manage it? So please just throw more light on it.
Yes, that's a very good question, Loic. Yes, as I mentioned, that there's usually a traditional way of writing titles or formulating titles. And that traditional way is that journals would want to see the study population. We want to see the research design, that's the methods that was done. They would probably want to see where that research was carried out. So that's the traditional way of writing, titles. So that would usually guide the domain and where they would classify that particular research paper. And now, if you've analyzed your data, you've come out with your message, you might now have a short message. As I remember those examples I gave, that orange seeds may be a better remedy than another treatment. That's your message. But maybe you've conducted a study to evaluate or to assess the efficacy of orange seed as a remedy for gastrointestinal disturbances in children 0 to 14 months old in Nigeria or in Cameroon, for example, or where else. So that's like your title, but the message is different and could be one of those messages based on what your data analysis and the output of your data is showing. So that's the difference. So, but remember then I talked about message-driven titles. A message-driven title could be Orange Seed Cures Gastrointestinal Disturbances in Children 0 to 14 years. Results from, I don't know, a randomized control trial. So when I see that title, I already know what that paper is going to talk about because it's saying that orange seed cures, it's like that's the message. It carries like the idea of the main finding of your research. Orange seed cures gastrointestinal disturbances in children less than 14 months in, I don't know, Cameroon, Africa. You see, that's the difference. So that is really straight. That is, in other words, it's like I'm presenting an aspect of my research findings already in the title. So that's what I've termed a message-driven title. So I don't know if you get now the difference. So
yes, Dr. I get.
For a start, it's always good to conserve a traditional research title, and then obviously you can discuss with, as you're a student, your supervisors on whether you want to go for a message-driven title, or even certain journals formally they would say they don't want a message-driven title, so they want your title to fit that traditional model, as we've discussed. Okay.
Okay, Doc. Thank you.
And yeah, so I think I have the honor, and I'd say we have the honor to have been joined by one of my I don't know the words I would say, but by Professor 𝐒𝐜𝐴𝐴. Professor 𝐒𝐜𝐴𝐴 has just joined. Professor Eugene 𝐒𝐜𝐴𝐴, who is a professor of medicine and endocrine medicine in Cameroon, and lots of other titles that I'll probably not go into, and my supervisor for so many years, and my boss, and also one of the senior researchers at the 𝒆𝒔𝒄𝒉 Institute in Cameroon, under which we are organizing this first edition of Harmattan School. I know he has a very busy morning and probably a very busy and difficult week, but I don't know if Prof, you would want to say something to this group of young researchers who have been convened for this very first edition of this Harmattan School. Probably even in writing. I know he's busy. Anyway.
He's right.
Yeah,
he's right.
Yeah, he's writing. Yeah. So I know he's busy. He's got a busy morning. So, but Loic, so that's it. I don't know if someone has. You remember I talked about. I don't know if George is still online. We talked a bit about the market of the journal. I think that is key. It's always good to go and examine the market before you start writing, because it's going to help you and it guides you on the different things that you would go into and pick maybe similar research publications that are tied to what you have done already. And in research writing, you don't do copy and paste, of course. That would be plagiarism. But another paper that has been published can guide the way you write, can really guide you in your writing process in terms of the formatting. And so that's why looking into the market is very key. Looking into the market is very key. Yep. And Professor 𝒄𝒉 just wrote, I'd like to express full support to this initiative, unable to attend. Yeah, obviously. Yes, Dr. Eposi.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Kate. Thank you very much. It's been so edifying so far. I just wanted to ask a question, like, how do we put, now talking about the message, what is like the message versus the conclusion of your paper? If I hope I've put the question well, like the difference between, okay, like you're trying to pass across the message, can it be, since you were talking about message-driven title, I just thought of normally we used to think, or I should say, I used to think that is in the conclusion of the paper you're writing, that's where you try to drive your message. Can you just help me put that into perspective, like trying to drive the message versus the conclusion of your paper? Thank you.
That is a very good question, Eposi, very, very good question. And you remember I talked about one paper, one message, or let's say one message, one paper. And so what I will be teaching you when we get to the research writing proper will be, how do you drive your message and where should your message be? So, but to answer directly your question, I would say a resounding yes. Your conclusion of your paper should carry the message, because many people would look at your conclusion. I would want to see your message. If you're writing a message-driven paper, I would want to see, because I want to say, I also do reviews. I also do participate as an editor in certain journals. I would want to see your message. If it's a message-driven paper, I would want to see it in your title. I would want to see it in your abstract conclusion. I would want to see it hidden in your introduction when you are exposing the problem you're trying to solve. So probably around the last phrase of your first paragraph of your introduction. I want to see you question the research idea that you have answered with your message. I would want to see it come out in your results section, probably the key display items in your research section. I would want to see it come out strongly in the first or second sentences of your discussion. I would want to see it come out in your conclusion. So in other words, you are killing your reader with your message in such a way that at the end, after leaving your paper, he can never forget the message of your paper. Do you get that, Dr. Tanda?
Yes, thank you very much. Well explained, thank you.
Yeah, so directly, yes, your message should be, your conclusion should be your message. Yes, Ines?
Hello.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Kate, and thank you for this amazing opportunity. I am a medical student. I am a medical doctor, and I just graduated last December. I have a question concerning the title of the article. I would like to know if there is a standard length that the title must have, or it depends on the journal. Thank you.
Thank you for that quick and direct question. Yes, it depends on the journal. Traditionally, anything between 25 to 50 words. That's a quick answer, right?
Yeah, very quick. Thank you.
Yeah, because your question was very quick and concise and precise. So that merited a quick, precise and concise answer. So it depends on the journal, but traditionally anything 25 to 50 words. Yes, thank you, Ade, I would say.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Doctor. First and foremost, I just want to say a very big thank you for this initiative. And I would just have to say thank you so much for the knowledge shared so far. First and foremost, I'm a medical student from Nigeria, in one of the university in Nigeria. But I just have a question concerning, let's say I'm curious about the reason why cancer is more, let me say, one of the killer disease in Africa among women. Then I go on database like PubMed or Google Scholar to check on publication that has been done so far. Then after gotten all of those publications, I read through and I was able to see um, some writing, some papers. Then I felt this is worthy. Do you think there's still a need for me to like try to carry out any research surrounding that? I don't know if you get my question, sir.
Thank you so much, Ade, joining from Nigeria. Really, from which state in Nigeria, which university, please?
Yeah, so that's the Obafemi Awolowo University in Osun State.
Okay, Osun State. Good. Really welcome. Very good question. Your question actually raises the whole problematic of why do we do research? Why should I do this research? Or how do I choose a research topic? Or how do I choose a research question? That's where your question fits. And usually it's best to do research where you're creating new knowledge. And we might know a lot already about cancer, for example, even as we already know. Heve, please, can you mute Heve, please? Even as we already know that, mortality regarding cancers in women is quite high in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, whether you take Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa, where they have data registry, you can see that clearly. Why should I go and do research in mortality or around cancers again somewhere in Nigeria? Why? That's the question. If we already know that mortality for maybe cervical cancers is already quite high in Africa. Now it depends on sensitive and particular interest. If this is just the very first initial research endeavor of a student, undergraduate student, it might be that this particular project wants to serve to initiate the student into research, into how to conduct research, into how to conduct research analysis, survival analysis with regards to mortality. That is fine. But in the big picture of things, it doesn't contribute much in creating new knowledge. Okay? Now, can I do research that has already been done elsewhere, for example, in Europe, in other parts of Africa? Can I do that same research in my context? There might be a point of doing that, of doing so. Why? Because populations differ and the substructure of population differ as you move, for example, from West Africa to East and then to Southern Africa. So even if research has been conducted in South Africa that has a very mixed population, for example, it could be very different from what you would find in Senegal, for example, where, of course, we know all over Africa holds the highest form of genetic diversity in the world, obviously, because we know today that man, as we know man, modern man, or even ancient man, sprang out of Africa. So the ancient DNA is in Africa. And the genetic diversity is so vast. So as you move from one region of Africa to the other, there are changes. And we know environmental and genetic changes do occasion subtleties and varieties we see in phenotypes and manifestation of diseases. So for that particular reason, it can be important to want to replicate a particular study which has been done in South Africa, for example, in Nigeria, or a study which has been done in the UK or in the US back in Nigeria. Especially now, if you a study where you are going into genetics, wanting to look at genetic differences, genetic modifications, given that ethnicities vary, that might be a valid reason. But you know, just the usual prevalence of these characteristics of this might not add much, except, as I said, if it's an undergraduate student, that project was meant really for initiation into research. But in the big scheme of things, it wouldn't shift anything with regards to knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. So those are things that you would want to consider when choosing a research topic. Of course, what is allocated in terms of financial resources to the research project obviously play a huge role in you deciding or choosing a particular research project or research endeavor. I don't know if that really shares some light, Ade, to your question.
Exactly, sir. Exactly, sir. I so much appreciate your response. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if there's any other question with regards to setting a research writing agenda. I think we've touched key things. I can see Dr. 𝐒𝐚𝐫𝐤𝐬𝐬, who is a very close friend and colleague, connected, also from 𝒆𝒔𝒆𝒂𝒓𝒄𝒉 Institute. Welcome on board, Dr. 𝐒𝐚𝐫𝐤𝐬𝐬. Any word?
Thank you, Dr. Kate. I very appreciate your presentation, and and I think all was clear with this good question made by our participant, and it's just to support the initiative and say thank you to reactivate this all this notion, authorship, and different parts of research paper. To us, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop recording for this hour, and we are going to go into some live stories. As I said, Dr. Agon's is going to take us into